Welcome to One Way to Machines and the 8th Gen Honda Civic series. In this video, I'm going to cover two common 8th Gen Civic interior heater fixes. These are two Civics that I fixed, both the silver one and the black one, both with different solutions. So I'm going to go over both so that you know where to start in trying to diagnose your weak or non-working heater. Those of you that have watched the other Civic videos know that there's a black 8th Gen and this silver one. The silver one I've owned since it was new, and at 200,000 kilometers this issue occurred. We'll start with the black Civic, which at about 263,000 kilometers started to show signs of a weak heater. Right there on the left of your screen you can see the coolant temperature. So what was happening in that car was it would only build up about 5 or 6 blocks. The engine was fine, but the heater was weak. It would give some heat, but not too much. Before going to the thermostat, when you're not building up enough coolant temperature, this can simply be low coolant. That's what it ended up being on the black Civic. I just filled up the coolant from the radiator, squeezed it with the cap off on a hose that I'll show in a second when we go under the hood. And once the coolant was topped off, got to make sure to run the heater so that the heater core, the coolant goes everywhere, and then you go top it off again. It's a process to top it off, but that entire car's heater system was fixed just by adding coolant. Where the coolant went in the first place, I don't know. Sometimes cars just lose coolant. You want to make sure to use the Honda branded 50/50 coolant. This stuff is not too expensive from the Honda dealer, so it's much safer than buying something aftermarket. We are using the silver Civic in this video, but once the black Civic had its coolant properly topped off, ran through the heater core, the blocks came right up to the center there, and this is where they should be for a good running 8th Gen Civic. And the heater worked perfectly fine and strong. Now, if this didn't work for you, it's time to move on to the thermostat. I'm looking forward to doing an airbag light video in the future on this car, but that's not the focus. So it's been 21,000 kilometers since I changed the thermostat on this car, the silver Civic, and as you can see, it's holding its heat very well. Now, what were the symptoms on this car? It would only build 3 to 4 blocks of that coolant temperature gauge on the left there, even when you drove it for a long time in the winter. So the heat was as best described very weak. So if you have a very low amount of bars, this is indicative of a lazy thermostat, which is a common thing on these 8th Gens to go bad. Here's the actual thermostat that I pulled from this car. You can see a great amount of corrosion on there. So when I took it off, I had to be very careful to clean the inside of the housing where it sat. It didn't come off very easy. It was really in there. And this cost something only like $60 to $70 Canadian at the Honda dealership. So again, this is not a part worth going aftermarket. Buy the one from the Honda dealership, and the repair is quite straightforward. Here's a look at the thermostat that was removed off this car at 200,000 kilometers. Like I said, this is the original thermostat to the car, and it served me well for a very long time. Here we're going to start at the driver's headlight, and we're going to move in, and I'm going to show you the location of all this stuff now. So right in the center of your screen, just to the right of those two rusty bolts, is the thermostat housing. This is what you have to remove to get off. This is not going to be a full DIY video. I recommend you use the 1A auto video, but I'm going to tell you things that I did differently to possibly save yourself time, coolant, and headache. So as you can see on the driver's side there, that little tub I have, in that general location, you want to push that underneath the car. You don't need to lift the car for this job. You do want something a little bit bigger than what I have there. The more wide it is, the better, because you're going to have a little more coolant splash with my method, but it's going to save you a lot of headache, and I'll tell you why I do it this way. So if you look down there on the ground, you can see the general area where the pan is. Wider the better. Now, in the 1A auto video, they tell you to drain the radiator from the petcock. Petcocks break, they're plastic, and you don't want to be taking off too much stuff from underneath the car. you'd have to take off at least a rad hose, which is very similar to the hose right here, and you'd most likely have to lift up the car for this. You could crawl under. But what I did is I just took this rad hose off right here, and I just let the coolant spill out. And it wasn't too much coolant that spilled out. Yeah, it went over everywhere a little bit, but the coolant, once you turn the car on and it heats up, it all dries off and goes away. This car doesn't have too many pockets where it could hide or that it could damage anything. So you don't need to do anything with the radiator there. You can do everything from on top, and then you just fill up at your cap here. Other than the time and coolant amount saving tip that I told you there, everything in the 1A auto video is pretty much what you want to do. In the future, I will do a full DIY video on this, but the repairs have been done on both my Civics. I mean, if the thermostat goes bad on the black one, we'll do a full DIY, but this is more than enough information. This is primarily to help you diagnose, and you can get this job done and quickly have heat back in your car for this winter. Stay tuned for the next 8th Gen Civic video on the channel, as it will be a replacement of the spool valve gasket for the VTEC. That is a common problem on these 8th Gens, and this silver one is suffering that.